Chala Dinkoy, CEO and founder of the Repositioning Expert. Welcome to another live Tuesday tea time with Chala. Today is Tuesday, yes, and I do have tea, but it is spiked with creatine, and that's for my brain, not just for my muscles. So on another snowy day where I am in Ottawa, it's just been dumped snow day after day after day. It's been lovely. But I am going to beautiful Austin, Texas next week on Sunday. And then I'm going to be keynote. I am keynoting at their conference, the Round Rock Chamber Conference in Austin. I'm really excited. So it's going to be a little bit warmer there. And we're also holding an executive roundtable. And then I go on to train at the SAGE cohort in McLean, Virginia for Capital One. And we're also going to be hosting another executive roundtable. So I'm very excited. So what I've been doing is, as you know, years and years of meeting $3 to $15 million CEOs of B2B selling service-based companies, and we get around a roundtable conference room, and we talk about what are some of the biggest pain points. And their biggest pain points, one of them is that they seem to look too small, or their size scares away larger Fortune 500 prospects, and that's one of their biggest frustrations. And so today's topic is about how to look bigger than what you actually are. And you're not scaring them away because of your size. You're actually scaring them away because of your behavior, and your behavior as a company, and in your marketing, and in what they can see from the outside when you approach them is too small. So I'm going to take you through 5 steps of how to change that. And the first starts with something that we talked about last week, which was CEO visibility. So Sprout Social, which is a social monitoring firm, found that 70% of B2B buyers feel more connected to a company if their CEO is highly visible. And 82% of buyers actually check out the leader, so the CEO's feed on LinkedIn, and before taking the meeting even. So if you want to look bigger than you are, or that you've been running into this as a problem for why companies are too afraid to work with you, because when they were asked, when we talked to, or research talked to B2B buyers in large Fortune 500 companies, half of them were afraid to actually go ahead with a purchase from a smaller company because they didn't want to lose face, and they didn't trust themselves enough to know enough about the company. So it's a risk. I mean, there's a saying that nobody is afraid to hire IBM as a vendor, and the reason for that is because they're mammoth. So the fix for not having CEO visibility, or not being seen as big enough, is definitely have the CEO and the founder speak at events and post about it, and then highlight your clients in the company be the CEO that posts. So highlight the client's success and who they are and what they're doing, as long as you have their permission. Or you could run it as a blind item with just describing, and you don't have to reveal actual numbers. It could be based on growth numbers, but again, post about it. Give advice and post about it. I mean, this is what I'm doing right now, right? And this lives on and on in not just perpetuity, but also it's republished in multiple different formats and reformatted. And get nominated and win awards and post about them. In fact, one of my clients is a genius with this. And, we came up with the idea of posting about her co-nominees or co-winners. And so every week, that's part of her stream that goes out. So remember, CEO visibility is key. So number 2 of how to look bigger than your actual size without lying about it. Super niche versus generalist. This is, I'll go down saying super niche, super niche. This is to me, the backbone of how you're going to stand out against everybody. And so here's another proof. Demand metric study a study conducted by the company Demand Metric said that niched content, so what you put out, if it was niched, if it was talking to a very specific industry about a very specific problem, actually had a higher response, 3 times higher response rate than generic. And again, don't forget the stat that I'm always quoting is 86% of buyers can't tell the difference between two suppliers. And the reason why that's happening is because you're not niched. So a very interesting thing happened yesterday. I've been speaking to a lot of the small businesses that we're inviting to the roundtables, and I had the pleasure of speaking to a gentleman who had been an association member for the NMSDC, which is the National Minority Council, and he said that he had been, a card carrying member for many, many decades, in fact, but he had never been able to really convert it. And so, when I asked him, I said, well, what are you doing in your outbound outreach? And he said, well, there's nothing different about us. We're just a CPA company. We're just an accounting company. And the large companies, it's impossible to get in because they already have, CPA companies, and nobody that would be a prime for us. So nobody that would be bigger than us would want to work with us because, they don't want to change. There's no reason for them to change. And I said, well, I purchased products and services for 18 years when I was at Pepsi, Pizza Hut, Frito-Lay. And I said, if that were true, I would never, ever be working with companies that were outside of our partners of record, or I would never be working with smaller companies. And that's not true. And I said, I also, for the last 15 years, have been teaching the smaller companies how to get into the larger corporations. And I said, I wouldn't even have a business if that were true. And then, we talked about the idea of super niching, and, he kind of admitted, yeah, we're not really doing any of that. But so it's absolutely every conversation that I have convinces me that if you're not super niched, that's where you're falling down, because there is always a need for what you do, but it's how you position it and how you target it, and then how you popcorn your way through smaller projects into a large corporation. That's how we work with my clients. That's what works out. So that's the fix, is you have to figure out, and that's why, people hire me, is to figure out where is that strategic hole in the market, where which industry and what one facet of a very painful and expensive pain point can you be targeting as a company. So number 3 is the consistent content. LinkedIn research said that weekly posting is actually yields 7 times greater, faster growth versus somebody who's posting monthly. So what I'm doing, the Tuesday Tea Times, whether they're good or not, I mean, I barely get anybody watching it live, but I've, have a lot of engagement afterwards, and people binge watch it when they're hiring me, just before they're hiring me. So this validates every single thing that I have read in research that I present on these Tuesday Tea Times. So consistent content makes you look more professional, and it makes you look bigger. So Content Marketing Institute says that 70% of B2B buyers actually consume 3 to 5 content before they'll even take a call with you, or they'll reach out and call you back. So the fix, if you're not doing this, is to actually invest in a professional infrastructure of content so that it is consistent and looks professional. Now, I'm not in a studio, I don't even have those big giant, mics for the podcast, which I do, but I don't even use it because maybe I should, but I haven't had the need, and I can do this because what's most important is your experience of me and your experience of what I know and how I present. So stability and longevity are the messages that you signal when you've invested in a consistent, which does not have to be expensive, but a consistent messaging of your presence and with your content. And then slowly you'll see with time that it gathers and gathers and gathers. I mean, I recently interviewed an SEO growth company, or it was actually a digital marketing growth company to work on my business to see how I can enhance my 2026. And when they looked at my content, they saw so much. They said, you have hundreds and hundreds of videos. It's like they couldn't really say how to improve it because, I mean, it just accumulates when you make it a cornerstone of your marketing that you're just going to stay consistent. I mean, it's very few and far between that I've missed. And it's only when they've been like major holidays or things I couldn't and didn't have the bandwidth to prepare for. But most of the time, for the past 15 years, I've been communicating with my community for every week, whether now it's on video and newsletter, but definitely on newsletter. So make that happen. Number 4 is proof of success. So this is a biggie because trust is a huge, 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 feeling safe, and that trust for buyers, especially, the larger the size of the buy, the larger the size of the buying committee. Here's an interesting report. Demand Gen report says 97% of B2B buyers want testimonials and peer reviews. Well, guess where they're looking at peer reviews? They're looking at their own industry peers. They're looking at people who actually do their own job. And they want peer reviews and testimonials and industry insiders telling them that you're okay to work with. So how do you get in there? Well, again, use super niche to popcorn your way into Fortune 500. Sorry about that. And you get the case study. So it's all about case studies and testimonials. Get them, ask for them, build them into your procedure and your process. When you start to work together, you benchmark before and after. You get a written and a video testimonial. You ask for them, and you don't wait until the end of the contract to ask for it. You wait for a trigger of a success that happened even a month into working together. I've asked for clients to do that. Or when something, a big milestone is achieved, or something of value happens as a result of your work together, you ask for it, you interview them, you put them on video, and you create detailed case studies of, if you're not allowed to say what the actual numbers are, if you're not allowed to use logos, fine, you can use descriptions of, size to give scope of how big the company is and how big the success is. You can use year over year or growth numbers of percentages, and try to get, as much as you have, permission to use the logos and to use whatever success stories you can. But this is a big deal when you have an actual strategy as part of your content to do this as part of your business. It makes a huge difference. I made receiving LinkedIn testimonials, especially at the beginning of my business, a huge focus. And I actually would write out the testimonials in the format of, what was the situation before I got there? What was the problem or the challenge? What did I do to fix it? And then what was the result, with actual numeric results, because business speaks in dollars. So that's what I actually would get from them while we spoke. And then I would send it back to them rewritten in their words on LinkedIn and ask for that testimonial, and ask for either they would approve it with one click or they would revise it. And some of them, they forgot to send it, but then I would remind it. So that's what you need to have, is proof of success to look bigger and to put that online. So lastly, how do you look bigger without lying about your size, is strategic partnerships. 84% of B2B buyers start with a referral list from people they know. And we already know that they're looking at their peers, and where you will find them, of course, is in their industry associations. So the fix for looking too small is, in this respect, for the strategic partnerships, is to get into their world. I have a metaphor for a marketing plan called the sun. So your eyes, the buyer is in the middle of the sun, and the spokes of the sun is everywhere they look at and everywhere they listen to and everywhere they are themselves and their attention is. So their associations, organizations, their trade shows, their meetings, their annual meetings, their any kind of conference that you can think of. And I think I already said trade show. So You need to get into their world. That's the fix. You need to get into their world. You have to attend. You have to say yes. I mean, I called a lot more people for the roundtables than were actually, willing to come out. And it's a major, Fortune 500 that's inviting them to this, not just me. And these are the same people who are not prioritizing meeting this, coming to this meeting because they don't see it as a way to actually get into a small room with very important decision makers of a major corporation. So always say yes when you have the chance. You just never know when you're going to be able to be one-on-one with them and get them to get to know you and your business. So show up to attend their programs, enroll in whatever they have with your association, show up to their trade shows, invest in time with them face to face. And also, don't forget about strategic partnerships where you work with complementary companies who are specializing in the same industry, so that you can always have a cross referral, or you can do co-events together, so that you're not competing with each other, but you're complementary and share the same middle of the sun, which is the same target. So, to conclude, really, this whole how do you look bigger without lying about your size is, again, when I used to work as a corporate buyer, I wasn't rejecting, and Fortune 500s are not rejecting you just because you're small. They're rejecting you because you're acting small and you don't give them the confidence with what they see in your content, in what they see in your presence online and in person, to make you look bigger. They just don't see that stability, strategy, and presence. So once you fix that through your CEO visibility, through your niche expertise, through the professional content infrastructure that's consistent, your credible client proof of all your testimonials, and you constantly being in their industry, once deciding what that one industry is for at least that year, and consistently positioning yourself as an expert in that one pain point throughout time in that industry, that's when they're going to take a second look and not feel unsafe, because there's so much social proof that you are trustworthy. So I hope that was helpful, and I will see you next week. Take care.